The Roman Empire. You hear the name, and immediately you're picturing this vast, orderly dominion stretching from the foggy hills of Britain all the way to the blistering deserts of Syria. It was an empire built and defended by its legendary legions, massive formations of thousands of highly disciplined soldiers. But what happened when a crisis flared up on the edge of the known world? A barbarian raid, a sudden rebellion, maybe a vital trade route gets cut off. The empire couldn't always afford to wait. Sending an entire legion was a huge undertaking. We're talking about a slow-moving earthquake of men and material that could take months to actually set in motion. And time was a luxury Rome often didn't have. So Rome built a totally different tool, one born out of ruthless pragmatism. Instead of always swinging a 5,000-man hammer, they sent a scalpel, a legion in miniature, a rapid deployment force capable of surgical strikes. These were the Vexillationists. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack exactly how this strike force became the logistical masterstroke that helped hold the whole empire together.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, the Imperial defense problem. Second, the Conturbinium foundation. Third, centuries and cohorts. Fourth, the Vexillatio strike force. Fifth, the legionary hammer. And finally, number 6, the machine on the move.
Section 1. The Imperial defense problem. To really grasp Rome's military genius, we first have to look at the immense scale of their territory and the absolute logistical nightmare it was to actually defend it all. Think about it. How did Rome defend its empire so fast? When a crisis flared up, they simply didn't have the time to mobilize an entire legionary fortress. Moving thousands of men, beasts of burden, and heavy siege equipment was just incredibly slow. They desperately needed a way to project power fast, but without sacrificing the heavy infantry discipline that made them so lethal in the first place. And that brings us to their brilliant solution. Instead of relying on that massive, slow 5,000-man hammer every single time, Rome developed a scalpel for rapid deployment, the Vexillatio. But to really understand how they could just peel off a highly effective strike force at a moment's notice, we actually have to look at how their military was constructed from the absolute ground up. Which leads us to Section 2, the Conturbinium foundation. How did they detach men so easily? Well, it all starts with the smallest, self-sustaining building block of the Roman army. 8. That's the magic number. It represents the Conturbinium, basically a tight-knit brotherhood of 8 tent mates. These men were the fundamental DNA of the Roman war machine. Keep in mind, each of these highly trained soldiers carried roughly 20 kilograms of gear. Imagine hiking across Europe with a microwave strapped to your back. They carried weapons, armor, entrenching tools, a bedroll. They lived, trained, and fought as one single organism. Now consider the ratio of fighters to support staff. Along with those 8 legionaries, the Conturbinarium included 1 or 2 military slaves and a mule. This is huge because it meant they functioned completely independently. While the soldiers dug out the camp defenses, the slaves were pitching their heavy A-frame leather tent, and every single night they used a shared millstone to grind their own grain for bread and porridge. They were an entirely self-contained survival unit. Section 3. Centuries and cohorts. Let's see how this base DNA scales up into actual functional battlefield units. If you take 10 of those self-sustaining tent groups, you get a century. That's 80 heavily armed legionaries, bringing their 10 to 20 slaves, their mules, and their 11 tents along with them. But obviously, a group of 80 guys needs serious leadership to function effectively under the terrifying stress of ancient combat. So the crucial point here is the strict hierarchy of specialized officers that ran this century. You've got the centurion commanding from the front and his opsio basically policing the rear to keep the formation tight. The tesserarius managed sentry duty and watchwords. But it wasn't just about fighting. The signifer, the standard bearer, managed the unit's finances and payroll, while the cornicularius oversaw the military clerks. Yep, even ancient Roman soldiers couldn't escape a staggering amount of paperwork. They literally tracked every single deduction for a soldier's food and clothing. This intense level of bureaucratic organization meant a century could operate smoothly pretty much anywhere in the world. Scaling up again, 6 cohorts formed a cohort of 480 legionaries. This was a massive, self-sustaining subgroup, complete with around 30 officers, up to 120 slaves, and a huge herd of mules. Because they brought their own localized administration and logistics right along with them, a general could easily dispatch a cohort away from the main army to go build infrastructure or secure a volatile region. Section 4, the Vexillano Strike Force. This modular structure we just walked through is exactly what allowed Rome to create our main focus for today. The Vexillation was the ultimate rapid strike force, because every single cohort already had its own commanders, doctors, clerks, and supply mules built in. A general could just peel off 1 or 2 cohorts, so roughly 1,000 men, and send them marching out of camp. They were quite literally a legion in miniature. They could solve problems surgically, crossing terrain way faster than a standard army, all without needing the headache of mobilizing the entire 5,000-man base. And hey, if a Vexillation needed the absolute best of the best for a critical mission, they might pull from the prestigious first cohort. Now, this wasn't your standard 480-man unit. It was made of 5 double-strength sentries, totaling about 800 hardened veterans. This was the iron core of the army, the men who had the immense honor of carrying the sacred legionary eagle standard right into battle.
Section 5. The Legionary Hammer. But what actually happened when Rome needed to completely crush a massive existential threat?
That brings us to the full legion. 10 cohorts combined to create a theoretical paper strength of 5,120 actual fighting soldiers. But as we've learned, the soldiers swinging the swords are really only half the story. Think about the sheer staggering scale of the logistical train supporting those legionaries. You're looking at an estimated 1,400 military slaves and 1,400 mules. That's almost 1 mule for every 5 men. Plus, you've got an artillery corps hauling 60 rapid-fire Scorpions and 10 heavy ballistas, a medical staff with ambulance carts, 120 dedicated cavalrymen for scouting, and the scribes maintaining the institutional memory of the entire force. When this massive, combined force deployed into its standard 3-line battle formation, the triplex Achis, it created a downright terrifying wall of men. It was roughly 609 meters wide and 138 meters deep. To put that into perspective, an enemy archer firing at maximum range could only shoot across about 1/3 of the Roman line. It would take a Roman soldier 4.5 minutes just to walk across the front of his own army. Finally, Section 6. The machine on the move. How did this slow-moving earthquake actually operate when it left the safety of its 55-acre fortress? Well, a Roman march was an incredibly disciplined affair, stepping off in a highly specific, calculated order. Scouts went first to prevent ambushes, followed by a vanguard and the main body of heavy infantry. And right in the center, that's where the baggage train sits. All those mules, carts, and siege engines were heavily protected, followed up by a sturdy rear guard to prevent anyone from flanking them. But honestly, even with world-class discipline, an army this size was a logistical beast. Even marching at a tight 6 men abreast on a paved Roman road, this column of over 7,000 men and 1,900 animals stretched an astonishing 1.9 kilometers. If you're standing on the side of the road, it would take nearly half an hour for a single legion to walk past you. If the road narrowed, the line could easily double in length, making it super vulnerable. And bringing it all full circle, this is exactly why that smaller, faster Vexillation we talked about earlier was so utterly vital to the Empire's daily survival. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought. The Empire wasn't held together just by brute force. It was held together by brilliant, modular building blocks. From an 8-man tent group grinding their own grain to a 1,000-man strike force rushing to intercept a border crisis, Rome engineered a military system where every deployment was a calculated masterpiece. What modern organizations do you know that could learn a thing or two from the Roman Contubernium? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for exploring this with me.